The content of this video may be academically incorrect and may differ from fact. It is a subjective claim, a conspiracy theory, and a novel. Since I am a Korean pharmacist, the English translation may be inaccurate. An energy drink is a type of functional beverage containing stimulant compounds, usually caffeine. Before providing medication guidance for energy drinks, it is necessary to know about the mental or mood state. Let's take a look at the steps going down from the normal state. It is easy to understand if you think of it as the stage of falling asleep. The first stage of falling asleep is drowsiness. When you lie down in bed at night, you don't fall asleep right away. You go through a stage where you feel sleepy and feel like moving is a hassle, and then you fall asleep. Let's call this the drowsiness phase. This name is not an official medical term, but a word arbitrarily chosen to aid your understanding. Once you pass the drowsiness stage, you literally fall asleep, which is called sleep. Normal people wake up from sleep in the morning, but people who have been seriously injured in a car accident or other serious accident may not be able to wake up for several days, which is called a coma. If you do not recover from this state and fall into deeper sleep, you will die. To summarize up to this point, you can remember that as the drowsiness stage becomes more severe, it becomes sleep, followed by coma, and finally, death. Drugs that wake you up from this drowsy sleep state and bring you into an alert state are called stimulants. One of the stimulants that many people are familiar with is the caffeine contained in coffee. Therefore, the energy drink, which contains caffeine, can be said to be a stimulant. The term energy drink is a marketing term, and I think the correct expression is stimulant. The expression stimulant is not a very attractive word for the general public, so from a marketing perspective, energy drinks are more appealing to consumers. In many countries, drinks containing more than 1% alcohol are classified as alcoholic beverage. This means that it is only 1% alcohol and water is even 99%, but this drink is called an alcoholic drink. The essence of a drink is not determined by the amount of substances it occupies, but by the properties of important substances that produce medicinal effects. The reason energy drinks feel like they give you energy is because of the stimulating effect of caffeine, so energy drinks are stimulants. Now that you know that energy drinks are stimulants, let's learn more about stimulants. The first stimulant in human history can be said to be the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In the book of Genesis in the Bible, there is a fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It is written as a fruit that gives one the wisdom to distinguish between good and evil. It is not easy to study when you are tired or sleepy. Your understanding and memorization skills are poor. If you take stimulants at this time, your brain speed will increase, and your understanding, memorization, and concentration will increase, so you will be able to understand and memorize everything that would have taken you an hour to learn in 30 minutes. The contents of Genesis in the Bible are about the Bronze Age man, who came from outside and was portrayed as a god, teaching civilization to the Israelites who were still in the Paleolithic or Neolithic age. Bronze Age people were more intelligent than Lithic people, and I think one of the reasons for this may have been their constant eating of fruits containing a lot of stimulant ingredients. There are fruits with a lot of caffeine, such as coffee and Coca-Cola, and there are many fruits that contain other strong stimulation substances even if they are not caffeine. I could hypothesize that by eating a lot of these stimulant-containing fruits, the brain speeds up and wisdom develops by observing various natural conditions around them. This hypothesis is something I subjectively established and is not an established theory in academia. If you are a master's or doctoral student who is inspired by this video and write a paper, I would appreciate it if you could indicate in the abstract that you were inspired by pharmacist Jae Woong Yim. Moreover, after Adam and Eve eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they become embarrassed and realize that they are naked. This can be interpreted as self-awareness, which is one of the effects of stimulant. One of the ways humans differ from animals is looking in the mirror. Animals do not recognize their own image in the mirror as themselves, but recognize it as another entity, and fight against to their own image in the mirror. However, humans have the intelligence to recognize that the person in the mirror is themselves. This is not unrelated to the reason why bronze mirrors are among the representative artifacts of the Bronze Age. Until the Neolithic Age, most people lived a life centered around tribes and adapting to nature. But from the Bronze Age, civilization developed in earnest, and human history, including political systems and conquest activities, began in earnest. In this way, the intelligence to recognize one's own existence is a very important intelligence. And the Stone Age group living in Israel came into contact with the Bronze Age people and used caffeine. Alternatively, it can be assumed that by consistently taking the fruit called the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which contains a lot of stimulating ingredients, his intelligence improved and they were able to understand and accept Bronze Age civilization. However, the most powerful stimulant is Philippone. Philippone is the brand name of methamphetamine made by Japan. In World War II, Japan worked under the influence of Philippone to produce war weapons faster. They needed to build more fighter jets to fight against the United States, but they had to do so with less sleep. So, they couldn't sleep, so they were drowsy, but if they went to sleep, they had no choice but to die from an American bomb. So they took Philippone, woke up, and built a fighter jets again. Another great use of the medicinal properties of Philippone is kamikaze. Kamikaze is a suicide attack that involves crashing one's plane directly into an enemy warship rather than flying a plane and dropping bombs. The ability to focus on the target even when enemy anti-aircraft artillery is pouring down like rain is the effect of the stimulant called Philippone. This effect is also related to the cardiotonic effect of stimulants. By strengthening the contractile force of the heart, blood flow to the brain is increased, which increases concentration. And as a result, the ability to respond to fear becomes stronger, so you crash the plane into the target even though you know you will die. If you watch Red Bull commercials, you can see scenes of people wearing wingsuits flying through very narrow canyons or narrowly passing through small holes. This is a very typical stimulant effect. Red Bull's caffeine is a weaker stimulant than Philippone, but if you consume a large amount, you can experience a stimulant effect similar to Philippone. You can even attempt to pass through narrow canyons or small holes without feeling fear. Same as Kamikaze Commando flew to the enemy battleship without fear after taking Philippone. In that respect, it can be assumed that the terrorists crashed the plane into the building during the 9/11 after taking Philippone. The actions of the kamikaze pilot and the terrorists who flew the 9/11 terrorist plane are very similar behavior patterns. The 9/11 terrorists must have felt very scared when they crashed their planes into the building. In this case, what you need is a strong stimulant like Philippone. This hypothesis is not an exact fact, it is just an assumption and a conspiracy theory. However, it can be said that the help of stimulants is absolutely necessary to commit suicide by crashing an airplane somewhere. And looking at the terrorist attacks before September 11th, terrorists mainly hijacked airplanes and exchanged the passengers as hostages with other terrorists held in prison, but it was very unusual to directly attack the United States with an airplane. There are many possible interpretations of this, but we can assume that the idea may have been provided by someone involved in kamikaze or someone familiar with that history. I think it could have been done by Japanese imperialist militarists who were proud of kamikaze, or it could have been the communist parties of Manchuria and mainland China in North and South Korea, where many pro-Japanese partisans participated. Many people may be skeptical because the Communist Party is a party that opposes imperialism and Japan. It is true that the Communist Party of the Soviet Union was active in opposition to German imperialism. But the Communist parties of Korea, China, and Japan were created more to be loyal to the Soviet Communist Party than to oppose Japanese imperialism. There were many pro-Japanese collaborators in Manchuria, North and South Korea, and the Japanese-occupied areas of China. They were loyal to Japan because they thought Japan would not be defeated by the United States and would live forever. But one day Japan was suddenly hit by 2 atomic bombs, then Japan surrendered. So, they became a betrayer in one morning. As South Korea and Japan were occupied by the United States, passive participants were forgiven because the United States is a country that values human rights. But since the Soviet Union was a communist country, there was no respect for human rights. When the Soviet Union entered East Germany in revenge against Germany, they killed and raped Germans at random. Likewise, North Korea and Manchuria were also killed by the Soviet military, and the rapes were random. So the pro-Japanese traitors hastily joined the Communist Party and turned into hardcore communists. When North Korea criticizes South Korea, they usually say that the pro-Japanese faction has transformed into the pro-American faction, and this is because they have transformed into the pro-Soviet faction. The principle is that in the eyes of a Buddha, people in the world appear as Buddhas, and in the eyes of pigs, the people around them appear as pigs. Because they had to prove their loyalty to the Communist Party to survive, they competitively accused and purged the pro-Japanese actors around them. So after World War II, a huge number of people were purged in North Korea, Manchuria, and China. In North Korea and China, the liquidation of pro-Japanese groups is often done by simple complicity in pro-Japanese groups or innocent people who have been falsely accused. They found that the easiest way among proving loyalty to the Soviet Uniones is opposing the United States. The logic is simple. The easiest way to prove your loyalty to your master is to kill his enemy. The easiest way to prove their loyalty to their master is to kill his enemy. Since the United States is the country that their master, the Soviet Union, hates the most, they make attacking the United States as their #1 mission. So even in South Korea, those who collaborate with the Communist Party always say catchphrase anti-US. Because anti-US is a very powerful word that hides their pro-Japanese actions. The Korean War was not a war ordered by the Soviet Union. It was a war in which North Korea begged the Soviet Union for approval to attack South Korea to prove their loyalty. The Korean War was the war that pro-Japanese collaborators in some parts of China, especially Manchuria, happily jumped into to hide their pro-Japanese actions. So, it can be said that the idea of kamikaze tactics was provided to the 9/11 terrorists as part of their anti-American struggle. One of the misuses of stimulant is that it is used for murder. When drug gangs or violent gangs fight each other, they often stab people with knives, but in fact, it is not easy to stab someone with a clear mind. When you stab someone, you are also filled with fear. At this time, stimulants such as Philippon are used to eliminate fear and enable you to focus on the act of murder. Since many of the Communist Party were former pro-Japanese traitors, they are also well aware of the medicinal effects of Philippon, which was favored by Japan, and used it favorably. In 2015, an incident occurred in which the U.S. ambassador to Korea named Reipert was stabbed by a communist. It can be assumed that this was done after taking Philippon. Just as the kamikaze crew drank alcohol containing Philippon and rushed into an enemy ship while shouting, "Long live His Majesty the King." The communists also administered Philippon and waved swords while shouting that U.S. should leave Korea. In this way, you can use Philippon to brainwash a normal person and manipulate them into killing someone. Summary and conclusion. The patterns of the 9/11 terrorist attacks and kamikaze suicide attacks are very similar. And in both incidents, the pilots may have been under the influence of Philippon. The idea of the 9/11 attacks may have been provided by communists in South and North Korea or Manchuria or China who were pro-Japanese.